Hi, good morning, good evening, good whatever time of day it is, wherever you are, wherever this video is receiving you. So it's time for another True Crime Tuesday. Now, if you've seen any of my other videos, you know what this is about. If you've read my descriptions, you know what this is about. We're looking at crimes beyond the superficial. We ain't sitting here and going in depth on the perpetrator and putting the spotlight on them. They get enough of that nonsense. What we're doing is we're looking at more intricate aspects of true crime. We're looking at legacy, law and policy changes. We're looking at inequality in the way that crimes are investigated. We're looking at the influences of society, media, cultural norms, and how they affect the way victimhood is considered, the way different crimes are treated. Yeah. So we talked an awful lot about law and policy and inequality in the criminal justice system in the last True Crime Tuesday video that I did. I'm sorry that was a couple of weeks ago now. I did talk a bit at the beginning of this episode 3 of Stripper Sunday, but yeah, just lots going on. Haven't had the chance. Sit down, gather my thoughts, and these particular episodes take a hell of a lot of research. I did do a special episode for you about sex work, law and policy in the UK. I'm really grateful to people who've watched that already. Thank you. That is a subject that's so important to me, that I'm so passionate about. If you've got the time, we all have the time, we're on lockdown. If you've got the time, please do sit down, just give me 50 minutes of your life. Yeah, please go check that video out. It means a lot to me. I'm really grateful, thanks. So we are continuing our theme of legacy, law and policy change today. On from Gina Martin, talking about that amazing woman who literally changed the law, where the experts in place paid to do that had failed us. Well, we've got an even heftier one today. The woman that brought about this legacy law and policy change. It's a whole video. And in order to talk about the legacy, law and policy change, we have to talk about the case that instigated it. So first off, I am putting a huge content warning onto this. Again, in theme of the channel, I will not be doing any glorification or huge focus on the perpetrator, but I do have to talk about him because it's really relevant to why Sarah's law was created, okay? Really fucking relevant. So I can't avoid it in this case. But I ain't doing the whole, and he came from like a family with 6 kids and blah, 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 blah. If you would like to know more about the background, if you're really interested in criminal psychology and the common criminogenic factors in the cases of people who do very heinous crimes, criminology student on YouTube, I'll put a link to his video actually. I think it's a him. The narrator's a male, so I assumed it was him, but could be non-binary, I don't know. Shouldn't assume that, should I? Them. Let's just do them. Let's just call everyone them, right? It's just more inclusive in it. I will link to the video in the description box because it's actually a very good one. They bring on a criminal psychologist and they bring on all sorts of different people to talk about Roy Whiting and those criminogenic factors, that background. It's done very sensitively as well, and yeah, it's a good one. I used it for some of the research for this video, so I'll link that in if you are interested in that. We ain't doing that today, and we are certainly not going to be talking about in any intimate detail what was happened to that poor girl. When it comes to a kiddie, I am not fucking doing that. And I noticed that in most of the newspaper articles and videos that I looked at for research, nobody does. And so yeah, that's good. I'm happy about that. I'm happy about that. That's good. Yeah, I'm going to talk about the case. We are going to be really talking about the forensics and the investigation of the crime and how it proceeded. Okay, because it's dead relevant to Sarah's law. If you look up Sarah's law, it basically means that any adult, any parent or responsible guardian of a child can go and approach the police for information about a specific individual that is around their child. For example, great example, you've been married, you've divorced, mum, dad's divorced, got kids, mum gets a new boyfriend. Now, very often, you know, when mum's wrapped up in that little love bug of just starting to see someone, it's not going to really be at the forefront of her mind to be like, better just go and check he's not a child sex offender. You know, I've got a kiddo myself. I'm a single mum. I've dated, you know, while being a single mum. It's not at the forefront of your mind. It just isn't when you first meet someone. And so actually a lot of grandparents and dads and, you know, aunties, uncles, those kind of people have used Sarah's Law just to check who's around the kids. So when you approach the police and you ask for a Sarah's Law disclosure and you give a name, I think they get back to you within 35 days, if I'm right. So that's the time frame. And yeah, if there's nothing to report, yeah, they'll just get back in touch with you and say, no disclosure to make. On the other hand, if you were to put a name forward and something came up, they will let you know if that person has been prosecuted for crimes of a sexual nature against children, and the rough, you know, sort of idea of what it is you need to know. They're not going to go into girly details, but just what you need to know. So wow, what an amazing scheme, right? Yeah, that's what Sarah's Law is. That's what it gives you the right to do. And anyone in England and Wales can do this, okay? Why would you not want to know that? Why would you not have that knowledge? And I'll tell you now, until I worked the job, I wouldn't have thought twice about it. And my kiddo's a bit older now. He's, you know, nearly 13. But I wish I'd known this stuff when my kiddo was younger. I actually had a real life experience with Sarah's Law, not myself. A friend, but I'm going to tell you about that later as well. So because I know I've got this tendency for my brain to go off in all sorts of different directions and I can't stay on my narrative and I shoot off everywhere, I'm doing this in chronological order. That's how I've laid it out. Look, I've even got my very professional notebook. I've laid this out in chronological order, and I think that is going to be the easiest way to work through this. So without further ado, I'm going to tell you about the abduction and murder of Sarah Payne. So we are actually starting our story on the 4th of March 1995. We are starting our story 5 years before we get to the Payne family. So 4th of March 1995, a man called Roy Whiting abducted a 9-year-old girl off the street. There was no prior grooming, there was no prior communication between himself and the girl or the girl's family. It was a spontaneous abduction. Mr. Whiting drove his car to a wooded area and sexually assaulted the 9-year-old girl. Mr. Whiting then sold the car. So he had a game plan here. He knew how to try and evade detection. He sold the car. Police did track this car down, and a full forensic investigation led to Mr. Whiting's arrest and charge. He was sentenced in June 1995 to 4 years in prison. Now, before you get seen in court, before you go before the judge and all of that, no matter what it is, whether you're in magistrates, whether you're in Crown Court, no matter what it is that you've done or that you are being prosecuted for, you will be seen by probation officers who work in the court, okay? And it's to get early information about you, to find out your background, to find out if there's anything that needs to be known by the court. One of the other reasons this is done is because there can be psychological evaluations requested. And in the case of Mr. Whiting, a psychological evaluation was requested. And the psychologist concluded that Mr. Whiting was not a paedophile, that it had been a freak incident, and that the chances of him reoffending again were very, very slim, very slim. So Mr. Whiting is in prison and he gets seen again by another psychologist. And this psychologist comes forward and concludes that Mr. Whiting is obsessed with young girls, not just attracted to young girls. He has an obsession with young girls, and that it is not a matter of if he is going to reoffend again, but when. Mr. Whiting was perceived as certain to do further harm to a child. He was released after 2.5 years in custody in 1997 and was one of the very first people to be put on the sex offenders register and to be under the supervision of a sexual offending police officer and the sexual offending police team. So Mr. Whiting, because it had happened in Crawley, the offence, he'd grown up in Crawley, lived in Crawley, and people knew him in Crawley. People who had lived near Mr. Whiting, neighbours, had stated that he was known for scouting for girls. So he would drive around when the schools were kicking out, at school kicking out time, and and was described as scouting for girls. So he had a reputation, they knew him. He decided, I need to get away from Crawley, I need a fresh start. So he moved to a seafront flat in Littlehampton in West Sussex. Seafront flat, families, seaside days, ice cream, kids on the beach running around, not many clothes on. What could possibly go wrong, hey? So let's skip ourselves ahead a little bit now to July the 1st, the year 2000. It's a Saturday. And this is where we're going to meet the Payne family. So it's a big family. You've got Sarah and Michael Payne, mum and dad, and you've got 4 kids. You've got Lee, Luke, Sarah and Charlotte. And in that order, 13, 11, 8 and 5. So it's a big family, loud, chaotic. So this Saturday starts out like any other Saturday. Michael's been working the night shift, so he's sleeping off his night shift, and Sarah goes to work in the pub that she works in. She takes the 2 girls with her, as she would on any other Saturday morning, and then when she finishes work and gets home, they decide to pack up the car and go visit Michael's parents, which was Terry and Les, and they lived in Glitter&Garterz in Littlehampton in West Sussex. So they pack up their car, they arrive, near to tea time. Little tea time set up going on, normal family things, kids play in the garden, settle down and catch up. What you been up to, how's life, how's work, all of that, And then the kids want to go down to the beach and see the beach. So after dinner, after they've done the clean up, they take a little stroll down to the beach. So this is Terry, Sarah, Michael and the 4 kids. And one of Terry's friends has been renovating their house in the village, and Terry wants to show Sarah and Michael the house, just all normal things, man, just all your normal shit that, you go and see your father-in-law and they're like, oh, let me go and show you Ronald's house in the village. It's all just normal, right? Normal family day. Well, the kids ask if they can stay on the beach. It's warm. It's a beautiful summer's evening, it's still light, it's a quiet little town, man. They are only about 250 yards away from Terry and Les's house when they're at the beach, not far away at all. And particularly as over the last couple of years, because those boys were a bit older, they were 11 and 13, they'd been allowed that freedom, they'd been exploring, they knew the area. And I watched an interview with Sarah, and she says that when you're a parent, there comes a point as your kids start growing up where you make a decision. You have to make a decision about these things. And I get that, and I'm sure anyone else who's a parent watching this video will get that. That, they ask, can they go out with their mates on their own? Can they take the bus into town? Can they go to the swimming baths? Can they go to the cinema? There comes a point, right, when your kids reach a certain age where they start asking for that bit of independence. And you have to make a decision. You cannot forever never let your kids go off on their own. You can't hold on to them apron strings forever. So Sarah says she made that decision. The girls are begging to stay with the boys. The boys are saying, come on, let the girls stay with us. We'll keep an eye on them. So Sarah says, with strict instructions, if you get bored, if you get tired, you go back to Nanny's house. Go back to Nana's. And so she walks away from the beach with Terry and Michael. And she says that her last memory is just seeing Sarah running around that beach, screaming, having a great time. Just a happy, happy little girl. Oh, fucking hell. So Sarah and Michael and Terry go see this house, and they stop in the pub and have a little half, about 30 minutes. And they head back to Terry and Les's house. And when they arrive, Les is outside holding Charlotte's hand, and she says, have you seen Sarah? So the kids had played on the beach, and then they started heading back towards Nana's house as they'd been told, and there was a massive cornfield right opposite Terry and Les's house, 150 yards from the front door, corn up to chest high. Can you imagine what a boss place that would be to play as kids, right? So the 4 kids are playing in the field, and Sarah stumbles and has a little fall and grazes a knee, And she gets in a little bit of a huff and, you know, as kids do, I'm going to Nanny's. And then Charlotte at the same time fell. So Luke, the 11-year-old, was seeing to Charlotte. And Lee, exactly the right thing, was like, hold on, Sarah, I'll come with you. And he just turned back to Luke and Charlotte to say, are you guys okay? I'm going to go with Sarah. And then he turns and he runs after Sarah. And he goes through the cone, and as he comes out of it, follows exactly where she's gone. As he comes out that cone, nothing. That quick, folks. That quick. Nothing. What he does see is a green car going that way, and a big white van with a man in it. Scruffy looking man with yellow teeth, who he describes as giving him a bone-chilling smile. That's how it's described in later interviews, and waving at him. So he doesn't straight away go, fucking hell, she's been abducted. They assume Sarah's run back to find Mum, or she's run off in another direction. They run to Terry and Les's, and Les is there and Sarah isn't. So they wait for Sarah and Michael and Terry to come back. Sarah's not with them. So we're now, I'd say, at about 7 o'clock in the evening, 7:15. The search for Sarah begins. It begins just with the family. They're thinking she's just going to pop out from somewhere, that she's just got herself turned around, she's just going to appear and pop out, but the panic is rising. People then start seeing this family, and they start joining in. And it gets to 9:15, starting to go dark. They realise that, fucking hell, we're going to have to call the police. We're going to have to call the police. And again, I get that disbelief, you know, just thinking she's going to appear. She's just going to appear. As soon as I call the police, she'll appear, and I'll feel silly. So the police arrive at Terry and Les's house at 9 p.m. And by 10 p.m, the phrase is used, the balloon had gone up. And what that means is that a case that has come into the police has gone from having a couple of bobbies sent out to being escalated right to the top level. The balloon going up means it goes up to the highest level in that jurisdiction. It was serious, man. We're at 10 o'clock at night. It's a Saturday night. Police were pulled off the normal Saturday night activities. There's an 8-year-old girl missing, and they combed. Volunteers joined in. The 100 police officers were brought in. They combed every inch of the surrounding area. And what was noted by one of the chief police officers was that there was absolutely not a single sign of Sarah. Nothing. There wasn't a sign of her. And they kept hoping they'd find, you know, some sort of natural trap that maybe she'd fallen into, a little culvert or a little ditch or somewhere a little girl could get lost. But there was not a single sign of Sarah Payne. She had vanished into thin air. So around 10 p.m, when the panic has really started to set in and people have realised this is getting serious, that was when Lee approached his mum. And initially in the search for Sarah, he'd not stepped up and said anything up till now. And he took Sarah aside and he said, I saw something, and I don't know whether to tell the police or not, because if I'm wrong, I don't want to throw them off in the wrong direction and, you know, have them looking the wrong way and disrupt the case. And Sarah said, this is serious now, son. If you've seen something, I think you need to tell them. And that was when Lee told the police about the green car and the man in the white van. And Lee was great, 13 years old, he was great. He gave a description to the police. They were able to do a little e-fit eventually of the man, but he gave a full description. Within 24 hours, word got out to the media, and the 100 police officers that had been brought in the first 24 hours increased to 500 police officers within 38 hours. There was a point in time where 1 in 3 officers in the whole of Sussex was working on this case. It became a nationwide case very quickly. And I know that if any of you watching were sort of old enough to have awareness of world events in the year 2000, you will remember seeing this on the news, and you'll remember that photo, the photo that sits in all our heads. I remember it, of Sarah in a school uniform, that little smiling face. And the search for Sarah really began. Within 24 hours of Sarah's disappearance, what the police did was they went and visited all the known sex offenders in the area, okay? Which makes sense, doesn't it? You know, you go for the most logical conclusions first, and it's family members, and it's the registered sex offenders in this case. So they went and paid a visit to other registered sex offenders in the area, and I think there was more than one that was actually arrested. I think a few were taken in for questioning. But police went and visited a man in his seafront flat called Mr. Roy Whiting. Now, do you remember me telling you earlier about Lee giving a description of the man in the white van to the police? Well, the description that Lee had given happened to match Mr. Roy Whiting very closely, but Mr. Whiting didn't have a white van. And Mr. Whiting had been being visited by sexual offenders and police officers quite regularly. Missing piece of the puzzle. So they send 2 police officers, plainclothes police officers, to go and pay Mr. Whiting a little visit. And lo and behold, outside his seafront flat is a large white van, matching the description that Lee had given from the day of Sarah's disappearance. So straight away, the coppers are like, This had only been birthed 3 weeks previously, hadn't been reported to his SOPO. So they went to see Mr. Whiting, and you know what? This man, this fucking man, the confidence he had, because he said to the police, I've been at a fun fair in Hove in Brighton, nowhere near here, that's where I was at fun fair. And he actually had the balls to say to the police, I was going looking at girls. That man on this fucking sex offenders register told the police he was going looking at girls at a fucking fun fair in Hove. He thought he was getting away with this. So when the police walked away, they just looked at each other and went, nah, something's not right here. There was a phrase when I worked criminal justice. I remember being told so many times, you'll get good feelings, and when you get them, listen to them. And it's true, man. It's true. I was never in the game long enough, and I was always too green around the gills. But my God, I've seen it in other people, in officers I work with who've been there 20 years. They were like, they get good feelings. They knew. And these police officers got that good feeling. They were like, something's not right here. So they sat in the car outside for a bit and said to each other, and they waited. And within minutes, Mr. Whiting comes out of his flat and he goes to his white van and opens the door. So the police decide to step out the car and just go ask him what he's doing. Just ask a few more questions. And as they do, a receipt falls out the van onto the floor. And so the police are like, what have we got here? And they pick up the receipt, and it's for a petrol station dated in the afternoon, late afternoon, 1st of July. And this petrol station was called Buck Barn Garage, which was on the A24. Nowhere near where you'd be going to Hove, okay? Nowhere near. It actually was situated between Littlehampton and Pulborough, also in West Sussex. That might not make much sense at this present moment in time. Very, very sadly, it will shortly. So straight away, they're like, you're lying? You're fucking lying, mate? What's this? You're fucking lying. So they decided, they took the initiative, which was very brave to do actually, and they arrested him and they took him in for questioning. They did a search of the van. They had nothing. They had to let him go. And at this point, there's no body. There's no child. There's nothing they could do, so they had to release him. Within 38 hours, I think, so Sarah went missing on the Saturday, and I think it was the Monday or the Tuesday morning, Sarah and Michael did a press conference. And if you watch these, be ready for your heart to be broken, because Sarah just had this amazing, unwavering confidence that Sarah was coming home. And she talked to her, and my God, like, yeah. What an amazing woman. The strength and bravery that she had to go and do that day after day for 13 days. Day after day, she sat out there and told Sarah that they were coming for her, she were coming home. And I think what gets me, because obviously we know how this story turns out, what gets me is that man, Roy Whiting, sat there day after day watching this mum pleading for her daughter to be brought home, and he fucking knew. He knew she was never going home. And Didn't throw a bone to the police. That's a special kind of fucking evil, that is, isn't it? That's a special kind of evil, man. Now, Martin Underhill, the lead detective in the investigation of Sarah's abduction, later in an interview, one of the pieces of research that I used for this video says that when you're dealing with a paedophile, you've got 6 hours. He was stated as saying that a child abducted by a paedophile will be dead within 6 hours. So as the days ticked on, I think the feeling became more and more that it wasn't Sarah that they were looking for to release out of captivity and bring home, that it was a body. Now, one of the great things that was brought in during the investigation was the military. Military jets flew over the whole of Surrey and photographed it, and then experts examined those photographs looking for anything, you know, freshly dug earth that could be a burial site, bonfires, just anything that could be related to Sarah. At the same time, the family were constantly being asked to look at things that had been found: shoes, jumpers, toys, pairs of knickers, all sorts of things. Day in, day out, the family are looking at pieces of evidence to see if any of them, nothing linked to Sarah. There was nothing. There was nothing that was found. There was one lead, this went national, as I say, huge. There was one lead that came through that seemed to be gave fresh hope. This came through on the 10th of July. There was a possible sighting at Knutsford Services on the M6, not too far from me, down Cheshire. And Sarah said that as soon as she spoke to the woman, she knew it wasn't Sarah. But there was that fresh hope ignited on the 10th of July. Very sadly, on the 17th of July, the news came that nobody had wanted to hear. A farmhand in a field at the edge of a farmland in Pulborough had found the body of a little girl. A post-mortem was done that confirmed the body to be that of Sarah, and the investigation into Sarah's abduction became a murder investigation. After the body was discovered, Roy Whiting was once again taken into custody and questioned by the police. They knew, man. They knew. But again, he had to be released because even with the body had a complete lack of any forensic evidence. There was nothing on the body that linked Whiting to Sarah, and they had to once again let him go. But this time, when they let him go, they kept him under police surveillance. They managed to get the warrants and they kept him under police surveillance. Now, I know I'm skipping back a tiny bit in our timeline, but on the 12th of July, a woman had seen a child's shoe at the side of the road, and this was in Coolham Road in Coolham. And when I heard this, I was a bit amazed because, like, I live near Birkenhead, right? And when you drive through Birkenhead, you see shite at the side of the road all the time. Like, there's a bit of fly tipping that goes on round. So, you know, you see shit all the time. You see kids' shoes, you see all sorts of things. I would not have thought twice. It wouldn't have registered to me seeing this shoe. And it did make me really sit back and be like, wow, something, that gut feeling we were talking about, some gut feeling spoke to that woman. She registered it obviously in her brain, but at that time it was Littlehampton they were looking at. It wouldn't nowhere near there. But when the body was found in Pulborough, Coolham was between Littlehampton and Pulborough, as was Buckbarn Garage. Let's remember that, eh? So this woman actually called in the police and she said it might be Notting, but. So she goes back for the police. I watched a little video that was interviewing her, and I just thought how the look. If it weren't for this shoe, I don't know that Whiting would have ever been convicted, right? So like the look as well that came into play here, my goodness. But she went back and she found the shoe. Police picked it up and they took it to Sarah and Michael, who identified it as Sarah's shoe. Finally, we've got something. Now, I told you Mr. Whiting had been put under that police surveillance, right? He moved out of his seafront flat in Kingston Gers, Littlehampton, because people had got wind he was being looked at in the case. You know, news gets out, done it, word got round, people knew he was a person of interest. So he went back to his dad's house in Crawley. Well, fucking went to Crawley. Everyone in Crawley knew him. He'd done it before. So they were even more. Vigilantes attacked his dad's house. He threw bricks through the window. His dad feared for his safety. He feared for his own safety. So he randomly went and set up in a fucking tent. Went and lived in a tent, right? And set himself up in a tent next to the estate where he'd originally abducted the first girl from in 1995. So I think everything had been done so chaotic, you know. He'd never really thought about an end game for this. He just thought he was going to get away with it. And then when it became very apparent the net was closing in, he decided to steal a car. Okay, so he decided to steal a car. He was under police surveillance and he decides to steal a car. Gets into a high-speed chase with the police. You couldn't make this up, could you? Gets in a high-speed chase with the police. Crashes the car. Police chase him on foot. Finally, Mr. Whiting's off the streets. The lead police officer said that he had nightmares, absolute nightmares, that this man was gonna take a third child while he was out, and there was nothing they could do till they got the evidence. Well, with Mr. Whiting in custody, refused bail, waiting to be tried for his driving offence, they managed to then do a full forensic investigation of that van, and they found one single blonde hair. And that blonde hair, they said there was 1,000,000 to 1 chance it was anyone's but Sarah's. Remember that shoe? It was a Velcro shoe, and Velcro is a brilliant forensic tool because it fucking picks everything up. If you've ever had kids with Velcro shoes, you know that the Velcro ends up just full of every bit of shite it comes into touch with, right? They play on the grass in the Velcro. They're on the carpet in the Velcro. You've got a cat, the cat's in the fucking Velcro. But in terms of forensics for investigation, it means it is a boss tool. And when they did the investigation of Roy Whiting's van, they found a red jumper on the front seat. Okay, red jumper, front seat. Fibres from that red jumper were in the Velcro of Sarah's shoe. Boom! Sarah's hair, she's in the van. The jumper's in the van. Velcro of the shoe. They fucking got him. You know, every time I read about this case, I just think, my goodness, that man could have got away with it. He could have got away with it. The jumper being one of the key pieces of evidence that tied the shoe to the being in the van. If he'd thrown that jumper away, they'd never been able to get the fibres. I mean, it was just sat still on the passenger seat in the van, you know, after the body was found, you know, over 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later, by the time they got into that van, the jumper was still there. If he'd just taken that jumper and burnt it, they wouldn't have had that evidence. There's one big thing that's never, you see, Whiting has never, as far as I'm aware, talked about the abduction. He's never given anyone any peace of mind. He's a cowardly bastard. And I want to know as well how the shoe ended up on the side of Coolham Road. Like, how did that happen? Was it because when the body was found, there were no clothes on the body? Okay, there were no clothes at all on the body. So what happened? He obviously discarded the rest of Sarah's clothes. Why did he not discard that shoe with the clothes? Did he discard the clothes? You know, maybe he burnt them, and then when he was driving along after burying the body, he realised that the shoe was still there. How did the shoe get in the passenger seat? Did he suddenly realise the shoe was still there and then launch it out the window, just thinking no one would ever, as I just said, people just wouldn't even notice? That was a very chaotic thing to do. Well, the whole crime was chaotic, to be honest. You know, yeah. You know, he'd obviously been watching the children out the window of his seafront flat, playing on the beach, and saw the parents leave and saw them walk away as a group, and went and got in his van and did what he'd done in the first event, gone scouting, followed them, and just happened, just in that freak split-second occurrence where Sarah walked out that cornfield, just happened to see an opportunity and take it. So I don't think anything was very well thought through on his part. But my goodness, considering it was so poorly thought through, he very nearly got away with it. if he'd got rid of that jumper, if he hadn't discarded that shoe, you know, it was just goodness, as well as a lot of very dedicated police work and a lot of help from the general public. There was a lot of luck that went, sounds like still a black then, a lot of luck. That's terrible. There was a lot of luck that went into this case coming to a successful conclusion, and thank goodness, because that man would have done it again. Yeah, he'd have escalated, he'd have done that again. That he needed off the streets. So Roy Whiting was put on trial and he was found guilty on the 12th of December 2001, and he was sentenced to life in prison. And the judge said that in this instance it was a case where life should be life, and he sentenced him to life in prison with a minimum of 50 years before he was allowed to apply for parole. So, you know, I'm sure you all know what that means. When you get given a life sentence, it doesn't necessarily mean that you are spending your life in custody. That's where a lot of people misunderstand. If someone isn't considered dangerous, if, you know, they are considered to be rehabilitated and able to reintegrate into the community, they are still under the care of a life licence within the community. They still have to report to probation. They are still under the terms of a licence. So, for example, a licence means that you cannot leave the country. So they can't go on holiday unless they're given express permission by the probation service, which, I'll be honest with you, it doesn't happen that often anymore. It's quite difficult to actually get permission to leave the country when you're on licence. Every time they get a job, they have to report it to their probation officer. Every time they move house, they have to report it to their probation officer. There's lots and lots of things. Probation officer has to actually come out and look at any potential property they want to move into and give permission for them to move in there. If your PO says that you're not allowed to move into a certain flat that you're looking at, or a certain house you're looking at for whatever reason, because there's too much crime in that area, because it's linked to drugs, because, you know, there's a school too nearby, you can't move into that house. There's so many restrictions, and good, that's how it should be. But that's why people are released on licence. That's what it means. It supervises them in the community. So you have to go before the parole board if you're on a life licence, or if you want an early release, and put your case forward, and other professionals involved with you come and talk at that parole hearing. Your probation officer, if you've got a psychologist, your psychologist, the police officers working with you in prison, you know, when they are between them, talk about managing your case within the community. So before Mr. Whiting could be considered for even a parole hearing, it would be 50 years, and that would mean that Roy Whiting would be 92 before he was considered for parole. However, in 2004, Mr. Whiting did appeal this, and that was the result of a precedent court case with the EU Court of Human Rights concerning another murderer. I think I want to say from Germany. I might have that wrong. Sometimes this happens where a precedent case happens, which then means one person takes it to court and they win their case, which means that rather than 1,000 million other people taking their cases to court, that sets the precedent of how that's going to go. In this case, it was to do with people's sentences being made political and the rights of judges to set a parole date that was realistically beyond the person's lifespan. Bit complicated, I'm not going to go into it too much, but yeah, because this person had won, Roy appealed and did win. But his parole date, earliest date of parole, was reduced to 30 years, which still means that Roy Whiting will be 82 before he is even allowed to apply for parole. And yeah, let's hope he never gets it and is refused repeatedly until he's too old to apply and he's died in prison. I know that sounds awful, but yeah, that man, what he did, not just the crimes that he did, but the fact that he knew Sarah's body were lying in a field and he watched Sarah Payne every single day, the pain that family was going through, and at some point he could have come forward and made an anonymous tip to the police just to have some sort of soul, man, and put them out of their suffering. Just, you know, even after Sarah's body was found, Sarah Payne went and did a press conference, and, you know, she sat there and she said, Sarah can come home now. Now we need to find who did it. The bravery that woman showed. So as this case had been going on in July 2000, as Sarah's body had just been discovered and the hunt for Sarah's killer had begun. The News of the World got information, as happens, that there was belief that an already registered sex offender that done this, that it was a known sex offender that committed this offence. And Sarah Payne also, from the beginning, had the belief that the person who had done this was a known sex offender, that this wasn't their first rodeo, okay? And so a campaign was started with the News of the World and the Payne family to give people supervised access to the sex offenders register. They basically were campaigning for parents to have the right, as happens with Meghan's Law in America, to know all the paedophiles in this area. So in America with Meghan's Law, you can literally log on and you can look in your area and it will show you every sex offender who's living in that area, okay? I believe also they tell you even if you don't want to know in some cases. So I believe if a sex offender's moved into your area, you'll get a knock on the door telling you, just so you know, there's a registered sex offender in the area. So they wanted something very similar to be brought in the UK. This had been pushed back against initially by policymakers and lawmakers because of the fear of vigilante justice. That people would see that someone was on the sex offenders register in their area and that they would go and do bad things to them, that you'd get the mobs with the pitchforks. And I do get that because vigilantes have been quite useful. I was involved with a case where the person had actually only been prosecuted on decoy evidence. So the only reason this person was being prosecuted was because a vigilante group they set up those honey traps where they had decoys in chat rooms, and they basically tried to trap people to see if they would take the bait. And you know, this person believed they were talking to a 12-year-old girl, and all they were prosecuted on was that evidence. That was all they were prosecuted on. So there would have been no case against this person at all if it hadn't been for this vigilante group. But you know, if someone's going to take the bait of a 12-year-old girl, they're a fucking paedophile, okay? They're a fucking paedophile. If you are willing to take the bait of someone saying they are 12, it's not just like, oh, well, they trapped me, like, you're a fucking paedophile. Okay. You're a fucking paedophile. But I do get why they were so reluctant to do this, because vigilantes can also be a pain up the arse and they can really impede the work you're trying to do. Because the thing is, when someone who is on the sex offenders register comes out of custody, if they've been in custody, they have to live somewhere. Do you want them homeless when no one knows where the fuck they are and they're just in the street for anyone who walks past? Or do you want criminal justice professionals to be able to know where they are, what's around, and regulate that? So I can understand it. Just from a criminal justice perspective, I understand it. But Sarah, after Roy Whiting's conviction, came forward and said, justice has been served. Now let's stop this happening time and time again. And she said that if she had known that a paedophile, a registered sex offender, was living on the seafront of Kingston Girls, she would never have fucking made that decision to leave them kids, because she'd have had the information. The decision she made was on the information she had, that, you know, I'll be all right. However, if she'd known there was potentially someone watching out their flat window looking at her kids, do you think she'd have left them? Of course she fucking wouldn't. So what was compromised on, and what Sarah's Law is a modified version of this scheme of Meghan's Law, you know, equivalent in the UK, where you can ask about known adults, okay? So if you're a parent or a guardian or a known adult and you have legitimate concern, you can request information about known adults. So you can't just you can't just ring up and go, oh yeah, are there any sex offenders on Bridge Street? Yeah, cheers. You know, you can say, I have Joe Bloggs, who is my ex-wife's new partner, and he's starting to get more serious with my ex-wife now, and they're looking at him meeting the kids. Can you let me know if there's a Sarah's Law disclosure that needs to be made? So, you know, this is a phenomenal tool, not just from the perspective of the general public, Sarah went and did so much investigation into the laws around sex offenders, and she found there were major flaws. And you know what, now when I heard this, I was very shocked. So when someone came out of custody, they didn't have to sign on the sex offenders register for, I think it was 30 days they were given. It was either a month or 30 days they were given to sign on. So this fight for Sarah's law brought around so much more than just as what it's reported and the public are aware of. It completely overhauled the way that public protection professionals handled these cases. From professional side, my goodness, the way that the cases are managed now is completely different. So I talked before about sexual harm prevention orders. These are set in addition to a community licence, in addition to the licence someone has coming out of prison, coming out of custody, or after sentencing, and they specifically relate to the crime. So for example, if it was an internet offence, this sexual harm prevention order can ban that person from having any device that is capable of connecting to the internet, and once a month or once a fortnight or once every few months, however often is deemed appropriate for that individual, the sexual offending police officer will come round and do a home visit and will check the house. It also means that if you have an inkling that the person that you're managing may have entered into a new relationship, or you know that they've entered into a new relationship, you have the authority to go and visit that person and tell them. And on some prevention orders and licenses, they will just be banned from being around kids, okay? It happened to a friend of mine that she had been dating a guy, and she worked with him, interestingly, within the same company. Met his family, been around to his house, met his mum, all of that, you know, knew loads about him, met family. And one day, a social worker and a sexual offending police officer turns up at her front door to do a Sarah's law disclosure to her, to say, did you know that this person was arrested for sexual offences against a child and they're on the sex offenders register? I mean, can you imagine the shock of that? My friend rang me in tears, hysterical. And you know, looking at it from the other side, it was very well done, because at the end of the day, they were letting her know that she could choose to continue the relationship with this person, but that they weren't allowed to be around children, so that if she did, the social worker was there to basically say, you won't be keeping custody of your child. So, you know, what the way professionals are handling these situations now and taking it so seriously as an aftermath of Sarah's law is very commendable. It's very good. Now, I'm going to do a little bit of a conclusion as well, because this also links in. You know, I was talking about the paparazzi and upskirting in my last True Crime Tuesday, and now they're a bunch of bastards. Sarah was a victim of the mobile phone hacking scandal in 2011, which was the same year that Sarah's law got rolled out nationally. It was piloted in 4 areas in 2008, and it was so successful it was rolled out nationally. It was said in figures that 60 children were protected from harm within the initial pilot of the scheme, and that by the time it was rolled out nationally in 2011, that over 200 children had been protected from harm. What a legacy. What an amazing, amazing thing. What just what a positive to come out of just such a horrendous, awful crime. So the News of the World had really supported Sarah in getting Sarah's law brought in. The year it got brought in, it was revealed that Sarah had been a victim of the phone hacking scandal. And it was the phone given to her by the editor of the News of the World at the time of Sarah's murder. So at the time of Sarah's murder, the editor of the News of the World, Rebecca Brooks, gave Sarah a mobile phone and then hacked it to share her private conversations. I don't know how much you remember about the mobile phone hacking scandal with the tabloid newspapers. Go and look it up. But it was just awful. It was the most predatory thing I've ever seen. And then poor Sarah suffered a stroke at the end of 2011, and I don't doubt it was caused by all of the stress and upset that poor woman's been through. She's doing okay. She's doing okay. She's continued doing her activism and work. She was awarded an MBE for her work behind Sarah's Law in 2008, and she supports, I think it's Phoenix, the charity. I actually watched some of the interviews with the siblings as well, and their lives were never the same, especially poor Lee. He had nightmares about seeing that van, and I think, you know, when the case was concluded, all he could think about was that van drove past him with Sarah inside, and he was that close to her, and completely fucking tragic. He very nearly got away with it too. So a hugely tragic case, but about this legacy that has saved hundreds of children from harm. Gosh, again, just like Gina Martin, what we talked about in the last episode, what an amazing woman. And especially after suffering so much tragedy, losing a daughter, later losing her husband, her whole life, never the same after the 1st of July in the year 2000, and the work that she did to protect other children. Absolutely amazing woman. And Sarah Payne did publish a book in 2004 called Sarah Payne, A Mother's Story, which you can pick up and or download and have a read of if you'd like to hear a little bit more about this story from Sarah's perspective. I have read it, and it's a very good read, and I'd much rather be supporting Sarah by buying her book and listening to her story than buying into any of the media that focuses on the perpetrator. So there's one last point that I'd like to make before I wrap up for today, because I think we are all unanimous in the fact that Roy Whiting is a monster and should never come out of prison. But Roy Whiting looks like a monster, okay? When you look at them pictures of him, he looks like a white van pedo. Literally, if you were gonna draw a caricature, if he was a fucking white van nonce, you'd draw Roy Whiting. You wouldn't draw a young, attractive man, would you? Or a young, attractive woman, would you? Is that what come into your head? Right, just because a man's attractive, don't mean he's not a nonce. Let's cover that. So when it comes to this Sarah's Law, you meet a nice man, he's very attractive, very charming, very young. Oh, he's gorgeous, he's gorgeous. You've got 2 kids. Oh, I don't need to do a Sarah's Law. I don't need to do any kind of disclosure. Like, he's such a young, attractive man. He'd never, he can get any woman he wants. Why would you go for children? The reason why the world is such a dangerous place, my friends, is because monsters don't look like monsters. They don't have pointy horns, they don't have tails, they don't have a shroud of black smoke around them, and they don't have a laugh that goes so that you can easily pick them out of the crowd. Monsters look like everyone else. Monsters can be beautiful. Monsters can be gorgeous. Monsters can be charming. Don't mean they're not fucking monsters. Monsters look like you and me. So my words of advice that I would give to anyone is, if you have kids and you're dating, do your homework, do a bit of research, yeah? And from the case of my friend, even if you know the family, hold on. Even if you've met the family, if this is a person that's new to your life, you haven't known for years, you've met them very recently, and you don't know an awful lot about their background, consider that these tools are available to you. There's Sarah's Law if you've got kids, and there's Claire's Law that I am going to talk about next week, because I will shout this one from the rooftops if I have to. Any man that I ever meet to date, to be romantically involved with in the future, I will be always asking for a Claire's Law disclosure on every single one of them. It does you no harm to know. You meet a new man and you've got young kids at home, and when it starts to get serious, you ask for that Sarah's Law disclosure and comes back with nothing. Great. Worst that happens is that it comes back and that person is keeping a very, very big secret from you that could potentially put your kids in danger, and you've just protected them from harm. It's just something to think about, and it does make me be able to sleep a little bit easier at night, knowing that this knowledge is out there, that people are aware of it, and that we're all informed, because that's the biggest power of it, my friends, knowledge. 'Tis the power. So I'm going to log off for now. This video is going to have been so much longer than I intended it to be. I'm going to have a big editing job on my hands. I'm going to do my best, try and make it as smooth running and as entertaining as possible. So please, once again, stay safe, stay at home, wash your hands, stay hydrated, take care of yourselves and one another. And I will see you again very soon and have a lovely rest of your day. Tra babes, tra, 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 tra.